Hi there, I'm nicodehaan and welcome to Living a Primal Lifestyle, where we explore a return to a more balanced and natural wild world.
To recover our natural health and regain our rights and freedoms, I'm Ellen DeHaan.
It's a beautiful day in Durango, Colorado, 33 degrees, going down to about 19 or 20, and had a little snow overnight.
Yeah, that was a surprise.
Yeah.
I looked out the window, the road was covered, the driveway was covered, and now, a number of hours later, all clear.
Yeah, I don't have
Melted.
to shovel, that's nice. Sure. Please subscribe to our channel on YouTube and hit the notification bell, the like button to help our channel grow. We also post the show on Facebook and LinkedIn for your convenience. Now, for those of you who have purchased Primal Edge on TFNN, we now have a new affiliation with the lab that produced it. You hit the link for the Humic and Fulvic, and you have the product you want. You can match this to the essential multivitamins from Mother Earth Labs, and you have the basis for what the Primal Edge was. They also have a lot of great selections of really good products, so you may be interested in those too. So all these links are in the description below, and
And you could save a little money too.
Yeah, it's actually a little bit more cost effective this way. Of course, shipping it to TFNN and having TFNN ship it out and hold it and have people do all this stuff costs money, so I can understand that. But great products, Fulvic and Humic. We've been using this for about 10 years, and we really believe in these products. These are the really essential nutrients in soil that open up the cells and help you detox and helps get all the vitamins and minerals that you get from your food as well as what's in these products.
Yeah, because it tells the cell what to let in and what to expel.
Yeah. And of course, all the topics that we on today's show are listed below, so you can follow along. So the first one.
And we also have a couple of things that are kind of follow-ups from prior shows as well.
Yeah, we definitely do. The first thing is, have you got a cold or the COVID? How to tell the difference. In the pre-pandemic days, if you had a sniffle and a headache, you might dismiss it as an ordinary cold and carry on as usual, even if you felt a little rough around the edges. But during this cold and flu season, how can you be sure if it's a cold or if it's not COVID-19?
Well, and why does it matter if you only have the symptoms of a cold?
Well,
you do what you normally do. You keep to yourself. You don't sneeze on anybody. And
then actually, my professor Eduardo used to say that when his kids got the flu or had a cold, he got close to them because he kind of wanted to get the immunity that our ancestors, kind of like a booster.
Mm-hmm.
So, things are different these days. The bottom line is, what it says here is that without a test, you really can't tell the difference.
Yeah, you can't. You don't know if you have a cold or COVID-19.
Right, so the tests are really important to a lot of people. Personally, I'm not going to get tested for those things unless I really know that things are turning real bad for me.
Yeah, well, it says if you have a headache, a sore throat, and a runny nose, do you have a cold?
They're primary indicators of COVID too, so they're the same symptoms pretty much.
Well, and the coronavirus is a virus that causes the cold. It's not the same exact strain, but it is.
Yeah. In fact, it says here the common cold is caused by a different strain of the virus. However, most coronaviruses, such as the common cold, cause mild infection in the upper respiratory tract and produce relatively minor symptoms.
Mm-hmm. And people who contract COVID suffer from respiratory systems that can cause coughing, shortness of breath, difficulty breathing, and fever.
Yeah, and this infection can also lead, of course, to pneumonia, kidney failure, and in most serious cases, death.
But again, we're talking about situations in which there's comorbidity, there are underlying factors, there are reasons why treating a disease is not a simple process.
No, and I think it's more complicated today, and as we've talked about in previous shows, it's because people are compromised. And we're compromised because we just don't have the nutrients, and we'll discuss some of that as we go along.
Yeah, and it does say that common cold symptoms usually peak within the first 2 to 3 days of infection, while the effects of COVID may appear anywhere from 2 to 14 days after.
Yeah. And we've seen that in people. People, it's been coughing for a week or so. Depends on, I guess, how compromised they are. But if you have some kind of comorbidity, whether you have just are used to having hay fever, or you have pneumonia
asthma.
before, or asthma, or you have diabetes, or you're way overweight, these are all factors that contribute to your immune system not working like it should.
Well, and the point is that if you have the symptoms that we've discussed, that's one thing. But then if you're starting to have a high temperature, a continuous cough, a new cough, a loss or change to your sense of smell or taste, then those are signs of Delta variant. And that's...
It's still currently the dominant strain in the UK, and it has different symptoms, either instead of or as well as all the other main symptoms. And they go down here in listing all the different symptoms. I'm not going to go over that. But in the next link, we have a COVID data tracker. And you can look at that, at your leisure. It gives you pretty much up-to-date things. But if you look at the first thing on here, excuse me, they show you a little map, and it's all red right at the top on the right-hand side. So this is showing
the whole entire United States.
Yeah, they're showing community transmission in the U.S. And this is
including Alaska and Hawaii.
Yeah, so it's going everywhere.
Everywhere. Every
it's
state.
Spreading very quickly, and a lot of people are saying this may be a blessing in disguise because
not even in disguise.
No, yeah, you're right.
And this is the Omicron.
Yeah, pretty much the Omicron. There are some new variants around. They say, I don't know what they are, but
doesn't seem to be something that's caught the public attention.
No, I don't think so. And
a lot of interesting. If you like statistics,
that has a lot of them.
And and it's.
Well, it's just interesting. So the next one, we have two of these links. One is called the EU drug regulator warns against the overuse of COVID booster shots. So this comes
EU
from
being for the European Union.
Yes, exactly. And their drug regulator is warning that too many doses of the vaccines could eventually weaken the body's immune system, rendering the extra shots ineffective.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yes, kind of like overloading the system, perhaps.
Yeah, we talked about this last week a little bit. We touched on it, and we talked about the fact that the immune system can actually become fatigued and stop responding appropriately or respond to the wrong thing.
Yeah, and we've seen this actually in some of the comorbidities themselves do that. Because now the body's reacting and reacting again, so it's overreacting, and now you get the booster shot, and maybe
it's even more input.
So there's a lot of talk.
The head of the vaccine strategy for European Medicines Agency said that booster shots can be administered once, maybe twice, but realistically that they should consider boosters administered annually, like the flu vaccination.
Yeah, in this other article it says here, repeated booster doses every 4 months could eventually weaken the immune response and tire out people, according to the European Medicines Agency. Instead, countries should leave more time between the booster programs and tie them to the onset of the cold season in each hemisphere, following the blueprint set by influenza vaccine strategies.
Yeah, so I guess there's such a thing as too much of a good thing.
Yeah, I guess that's the way to put it, for sure. Well, we've never really taken any of the vaccines for the flus.
Right, never,
years.
yeah.
And of course, we haven't gotten the flu either, so maybe that's one of the reasons why we decided not to take it.
I don't know. It seems it could also be construed as I wore garlic around my neck to keep the vampires away. You don't see any vampires, do you? Well, then it worked.
Right.
It's a matter of individual. It's choice, and it's also your general state of health that we don't catch the flu. We haven't caught the flu, influenza.
Not in years. Yeah.
And
well, it's our belief, really, that our immune system is pretty strong.
Is that a belief?
Well, it's kind of a belief, but It may be a belief, it may be a truth.
We do our best to strengthen our immune system.
Definitely so.
And
It's an important aspect of this whole thing because we know that people who are compromised just have less of an ability to weigh off.
More susceptibility.
Yeah, more susceptibility, exactly. An interesting article here called "Two Cannabinoids Have Opposing Effects on the COVID cultures." So this is, they're talking about CBDs, which you take a lot of and I take sometimes.
Yeah, well, there's different kinds of CBDs.
Yeah, of course there are, but...
and the ones that I take are not the exact ones that they're talking about.
No, but what I'm saying is THC is the other thing they're talking about. So they're thinking that the THC may actually disrupt the CBD effect, benefit effect.
The benefit, yeah.
So,
but there was a particular strain of CBDs.
Yeah.
I don't remember if it was A or B. There was one that was...
well, you know, a lot of the things that
be...
we take are full spectrum. So assumably that the ones they're talking about could be in there and probably are.
Well, the CBDs don't have any THC in them.
That's right.
They're not...
and for the particular reason that they disrupt the CBD effects.
Yeah, well, and the CBDs, the particular strain that I take it helps with stress.
Yeah.
And sleeping.
But again, it's full spectrum. So
right.
In other words, it has all these things in them. So it says here the researchers behind the new work, primarily at the University of Chicago, started with lung cancer cells that produce the protein that SARS-CoV-2 uses. CoV-2 uses to infect cells and dump both the virus and the CBDs on the cells. And it worked. At non-toxic doses, the reproduction of the virus was strongly inhibited by the CBD.
Then they went on to confirm the result in other lung cell lines, and they also demonstrated that a partly metabolized derivative had a similar effect, but a range of additional cannabinoids did not. Right. So it's a particular strain of the CBD, and it's pretty interesting.
Well, they did say one of the
hemp is just an amazing plant.
Yeah, it is. That's for sure. Especially for hemp and for producing great rope and clothing. And
well, yeah, that was the first thing, you know, it's a fiber. But in addition to that, it's a source of incredibly good medicines for a lot of diseases and conditions.
So one of the downsides, they said that THC, the most potent mind-altering substance in cannabis, did not have an effect on its own. But when given at the same time of CBDs, it reversed CBD's inhibition of viral growth.
Yeah, so the idea is not to combine the two.
So smoking it probably will not do what it's...
well, you want to stick, if you're going to treat it with CBD, then treat it with CBD and don't muddy the waters.
Exactly. Yeah, that's basically what it says. Yeah. So to an extent, it says it appears that the virus shuts off some stress responses that would normally stop the virus. And CBD either prevents the shutdown or restores the response. They don't know exactly
how it works, but it does work.
Yeah. So the authors themselves emphasize that without a carefully run clinical trial, we shouldn't get too excited about these results. And they certainly advise against trying self-treatment with the CBDs, given self-treatment with CBDs is rather harmless and has a lot of benefits itself.
Well, again, like everything else, like the vitamins, like the supplements, the source of the supplement, the source of the CBD, how pure is it, how carefully created is it, and so on, is important. So, I mean, not buying something just off the shelf at the discount vitamin store, rather investigating and looking at it.
So the researchers deserve credit, they say, for going well beyond most studies that have been involved in the testing drugs against
the virus.
They have plausible mechanisms of action, which is something
that's lacking in the other studies.
Right. Okay. Interesting article.
Yeah.
Another article I found very interesting was about fat's unexpected role in muscle stem cell fate. And the reason this got to mind was because, of course, in the last 30 or 40 years, we've been vilifying fats of all kinds, pretty much.
Warning people away from it.
And having these low-fat diets for years, which we discovered about maybe 20 years ago that we decided that maybe it's a good idea to put the fat back in.
Yeah, well, a certain fat.
Yeah.
I mean,
certainly.
obviously we're not.
Well, remember, they've vilified saturated fat especially,
And,
which
and
is
from
something
red
that,
meat, from meat, you know,
Right.
the fat that we now feel is actually beneficial to
Yeah.
the human body and to the repair process and just to supporting your brain functions.
well,
And
pretty much if you're on a primal type diet or the carnivore diet or the paleo style diet, you've added fat back into your diet and you've noticed that the difference is very beneficial. And we've noticed that. And this is one of the reasons that we started doing vitamins and things like that that contain humic and fulvic acid, as well as putting fats back in. We wanted the signaling in our body to be really good, so that
complete aminos.
yeah, and the complete aminos and things like that. And these are really essential now that after 20 years of doing this, we really felt really good and noticed that we don't have the problems that a lot of people do who are compromised maybe on a low-fat diet, eating conventional food or even eating fast
food,
foods.
yeah.
So here it says the scientists have shown for the first time that fat inside adult muscle stem cells regulate their fate.
I mean, the key to this article is that they're saying that in the creation of stem cells, and stem cells are important for rebuilding the body and for helping with aging and all of those things, that when they started investigating and studying stem cells, they found that there were certain kinds of fats. They call them lipocytes, I think.
Well, lipids, yes.
Lipocytes. Anyway, that were involved in the creation of stem cells, the proliferation of stem cells,
Keeping them healthy.
Yeah.
It says here to then find out that it plays such a strong role in the fate of the cell. The stem cell is remarkable. It has potential implications for muscular diseases, aging, and animal sciences.
Yeah, like the MS or Parkinson's or some of those things.
So cells contain various kind of fats or lipids, and these are essential for energy production, cell membrane composition, and chemical signaling. And this is really important, leads us back to the humic and fulvic acids that tell the cells to open up to get the good stuff in and then kind of detox to get the bad stuff out. So the fats that we intake, the healthy fats, are the things that are helping these signals get through and helping these membranes keep pathogens out.
Right. And
And this is
strengthening
huge,
cell
especially
membranes
with
too.
what you consider what's happened these last 3 years with this big epidemic that people just aren't getting this signaling. And this really has to do with not only the soil being compromised, but their diets being compromised, eating the wrong kinds of foods, eating the standard American diet, I would say, too.
The SAD.
Yeah, exactly. The fad diet.
SAD.
Rather than existing in a static pool of resources, researchers discovered the number of these droplets changes significantly in an individual cell and varies from cell to cell. The number of the droplets also regulate what the stem cells become.
Right. So they say they coupled that with newly identified roles of lipids in other stem cell types, including cancer stem cells, that suggest fat is much more involved than they previously thought.
Surprise, surprise.
Now, I almost hate to use the word fat because it has such a bad connotation.
Yes.
But anytime we say fat, we're talking about natural animal fats.
Fish fats.
Animal, any kind of
pretty much animal
meat,
fats. And,
poultry, fish.
and the reason
anything.
we mention animal fats or fish fats rather than vegetable fats is because vegetable fats don't absorb as easily.
Right.
And are not used by the body as much. Yes, you get a percentage like a flaxseed. Everybody talks about how great flaxseed oil is. However, it's a small percentage that is actually a benefit to us because our body
it's not available.
It's not available, exactly so.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
So
interesting.
they go on to say here these lipid droplet dynamics are critical to maintaining a healthy balance of cells. We need new muscle cells for repair, but we don't want the stem cells dividing uncontrollably like it would be occurring in cancer. And the depletion of lipid droplets is like a brake to stop the uncontrolled
proliferation. It says the study showed that stem cells with higher numbers of lipid droplets continued to divide or went on to differentiate and become muscle cells. Those with lower numbers returned to replenish the stock of dormant stem cells for the next injury. In fact, during self-renewal, they somehow deplete or rid themselves of the lipid droplets, and then once they're in a dormant state, they have none.
Yeah.
It's so interesting.
Yeah, they say the results were amazing as either too many or too few of these lipid droplets disrupted the stem cell fate.
Homeostasis.
Homeostasis. Right?
Yeah, it's pretty interesting stuff. And it says it may be that the secondary metabolites formed from degradation of the lipid droplets are also important. These fats may be much more than an energy source for the cell. So this is kind of a new area of investigation, and this was done at Purdue University. So.
Yeah. Next article we have is called "The Women's Health at Risk Due to the Rise in Meat-Free Diets," scientists say.
Yeah, this one was kind of alarming.
Yeah, young women who consume little or no red meat and dairy are at risk for developing vitamin deficiency that could lead to health problems later in life. So they're really talking about the young women, the teenagers.
Yeah.
And we know a lot of the trends these days are instead of going from the farm, we're going into the lab to produce these animal-like products that are made from plants. And they're even calling them like plant chicken, or they're calling chicken made from plants, burgers made from plants.
Chicken.
Yeah, no chicken.
Yeah, well, I think they point out in this article that the young women are more susceptible to the concept of becoming vegetarians or vegan, or, cutting meat out of their diets based upon the saving of the planet or the cruelty to animals, that kind of thing, for whatever reason.
Well, also the news that they're saying, here's some healthy stuff. Here's a new plant-based chicken, and this is going to be much more healthy. It's going to be better for the planet, like you said.
Yeah. So while you're searching for alternatives and options, what they found with this study was Professor Ian Givens, who is a director for the Institute of Food, Nutrition, and Health at Reading University. He told a briefing at the Science Media Center half of the women aged between 11 and 18 were below the minimum recommended level of iron and magnesium. A quarter of the women from the group were consuming too little iodine, calcium, and zinc, so that this would lead to future developmental nutritional deficiencies. Yeah. And then it says the teenage years are absolutely critical for bone development. And if you don't get it right, it has a major significance in terms of bone health in the elderly. So it increases the risk of breakage, and I'm sure osteoporosis.
And they say these deficiencies are because women are more sensitive to the messages put out by how bad meat and dairy products are for the environment, just like you said before. Yep.
Yeah, so Professor Givens says broader comparisons between the benefits of meat and plant-based products should be provided. In other words, people should be given all the information and understand how to balance their diets.
It's kind of like the same decisions between the vaccines and saying this is the only choice you have. Give us the information, because a lot of the doctors that we've listened to talk about all these preventative measures and talk about if you do get the COVID, then now all of a sudden you have a bunch of things that you can do before you even get to the hospital.
Alternative treatments.
Yeah, there's treatments that were pretty well proven and not suggested at all, in fact, steered away from, and the only solution seems to be the vaccines and now the boosters. And now we're finding out that perhaps, well, first of all, they told us for a long time, for the first couple of years, that, and this didn't really come directly from the labs, but it did come from the governments and these agencies saying that the only thing to do was the vaccine, and this would prevent you from getting it.
Yeah, and then that was not true.
Right, and then they said, well, it'll prevent you from getting it seriously.
Yeah, it will keep you out of the hospital.
And they also said that it'll prevent transmission. None of those things are really true.
Well,
I think
it turned out.
Yeah, it turned out. Well, one of the things that's probably true is that if you're really compromised, it'll prevent you from getting worse.
It might.
It might. Yeah.
Depending on your comorbidities.
So they said here also, while it's possible to eat a balanced vegan diet, it does require a lot of planning, a lot of understanding what the nutrients are lacking in plant-based sources and what supplements are needed to make up for them. And this is something contrary to what we hear. We hear that plants give you everything. And they certainly do not.
No.
So, for example, omega-3 is really lacking in a vegetarian diet, but it's really important for brain health. Children between the ages of 11 and 18 have brains that are still developing, and they need preformed DHA to support that. Yeah. And it's not just that, it's also the different kind of fats like the saturated fat and the polyunsaturated fats and the monounsaturated fats. We need all of these things. We need them in proper orders.
In balance.
In balance, and it seems like the plants don't give us the balance, but the animals seem to give them more regularly, I would say.
Yeah, well, they're more bioavailable to us because of the way we evolved as humans, and our bodies and our systems are such that that we thrive on, and we can easily digest and get what we need from, get some of what we need. These days, you really have to source your food and figure it out. But
it's not. You have to source everything. Certainly, you're not going to go to the normal store, the normal food store.
Well, the big chain groceries.
Right, because they're not going to have, most of them don't. I think some of them do. It says here that they warn people who are thinking of switching to a vegan diet against switching to a vegan meat alternatives without adding different types of vegetables to their meat rotations.
To their meal rotations.
Meal rotations, excuse me. Focus on good plant-based diet instead of a junk food diet because they're thinking more nutritions. Don't just swap out a sausage roll for a vegan sausage roll.
Right.
I don't even get how they can call it a sausage.
I know.
You could never say that the...
Truth in advertising. What happened to that?
Well, what I was going to say is you could never come out with a product that was meat-based and call it a vegetable.
Right. And
here's a carrot made out of a liver.
Sawdust.
Well, that's pretty much what they're talking about.
That's great.
Interesting article.
Well, you have to use words that people are used to from a marketing perspective. And if they hear the word meat, then that means something to them. And it's
actually derogatory now.
Well,
in a sense.
Yeah. Well, one interesting thing that they say in here is, let's see, where is it? I was just looking. Oh, people say, well, we can get it from plants. Well, there is some omega-3 from plant-based products, but then you have to convert it into a suitable form so your body can absorb it, and there isn't very much of it.
That's right.
So you eat walnuts, hemp seeds, flax seeds, but it only gives you a tiny bit. So if you're going to do that, you need to take a supplement that will give you...
The common theory is really about 5%, where the animal or fish product that's healthy will give you 100%.
Right.
That's a huge difference.
That's a huge difference. You'd have to be grazing all day in the field to get...
There you go, and that's what the animals do, and that's the reason they do it, and their stomachs are different. Remember, the cow has 3 stomachs, and the reason for the stomach is to ferment it.
Right, and
so to convert
break it down.
Yeah, exactly. So, okay. Next article is called "The Western Diet Causing a Spike in Autoimmune Diseases."
Yeah, we talked somewhat about this last week.
Yeah, and this kind of ties into what we're talking about. Autoimmune diseases are becoming more prevalent around the world. They come about when the body's immune system has the difficulty distinguishing between healthy cells from the unhealthy cells, microorganisms.
Yeah, and this includes type 1 diabetes, rheumatoid arthritis, and multiple sclerosis. And then with the global spread of Western diets, I mean, the chains that have moved into Asia and the Eastern European countries and so on, it's the Western diet, know, and it's so...
So autoimmune conditions are those where the body's immune system confuses healthy cells with unwelcome microorganic intruders.
So we talked, so it says that there was a study done by the U.S. National Institute of Environmental Health Sciences that analyzed levels of anti-nuclear antibodies, which are biomarkers for autoimmune disease, in the blood serum of more than 14,000 people over a 25-year period. Correlated the data to sex, age, ethnicity, weight, smoking history, and alcohol consumption. And what the results were was concentrations of anti-nuclear antibodies increased from 11% in the very early samples in the late 1980s and early 1990s to almost 16% in the 2010s.
And now probably even more.
Yeah, probably even more.
So there's a chart on here that shows the increase. Most autoimmune diseases can't be cured.
Yeah, that's kind of
Ominous.
well, it is, except for the part where it says, but many of them can be managed.
Yeah,
but
managed.
the cost is high, and the question becomes: do they mean managing by drugs and prescriptions
Well, they can be managed by healthy decisions. In other words, getting the right foods and doing exercise and things like that. But most of the time that we have a cure, it's much easier to take a pill or something like that. And that's kind of the trend that's been hammered into us.
Well, that's, you go to the doctor, you have a situation, instead of it. If you're overweight and you get high blood pressure and you start to be pre-diabetic, instead of saying to you, okay, let's put you on a reasonable diet, get some nutritional advice, let's get you a little more active and get some more exercise. They say, here's a pill that will take care of the...
Ask your doctor about this drug.
Yeah, this will get rid of this cholesterol, and
well, it's interesting here, this next paragraph. It can be tough to stay healthy when living in a big city. Something that we have talked about in the past. One of the reasons we moved to Durango, to get away from the sprawling spread of development, let's say.
Yeah, well, it's just there's so many people and so many cars and so much traffic and so much hustle and bustle, and we were
it's
interested
getting busier.
in...
It's just like if you cram animals into a smaller space, they get unhealthy.
And
that's not the way.
Disease spreads. And,
And in the wild, it's not like that. They spread out automatically, and the numbers are automatically diminished because of the environment. But it's,
whatever the environment, they only grow up to the point in which the environment can support them. That's, nature does that, but we don't do that.
No, we don't do that, and all the pests that are around us don't do that either, because we have plenty of food for them, the grains that we store.
Yeah, well, look at the bubonic plague. That was a long time ago, but it came about because of the too many people living in too few spaces, and the proliferation of the rats and the ability to carry the disease, and it was a whole different thing.
So next article is called 90% of the U.S. has a poor diet and 25% don't exercise.
Yeah, and that's another problem that happened with the shutdown, that people couldn't get to the gym. A lot of people are only able to exercise if they have to have a regimen, they have somebody pushing them, they have a buddy, a workout buddy, they go to the gym, it's part of their social circle.
And you're told not to go outside.
Well, that was a whole different problem. It
says here, as the pandemic enters its third year with cases and hospitalizations as high as ever, fresh data from the Center of Disease Control and Prevention reminds us that we already have a long track record of failing to manage our health. A poor diet and inactivity can set both people up for medical conditions such as a weak immune system or function, obesity, cardiovascular disease, diabetes, and certain cancers, the CDC notes.
Yeah, and getting enough physical activity could prevent 1 in 10 premature deaths. Too many people are missing out on the health benefits of physical activity, which are something like improved sleep, reduced blood pressure and anxiety, lowered risk for heart disease, several different types of cancers, and dementia, including Alzheimer's disease.
Yeah, and the pandemic is likely to have disrupted people's exercise too, like you said, with gyms closing, disruptions to work and daycare schedules. The recent survey results found that 25% of the people weren't doing any exercise outside of work activities.
Yeah.
So if you're lucky, you've got a work regimen that requires some kind of
but that's very, very rare.
very few now.
Yeah, but I mean, the point is that, first of all, with the lockdown, it's one thing. It's one thing if you're adults living in the home without children, but if you had children, you were dealing with homeschooling, you were dealing with daycare, you were dealing with trying to juggle your work remotely
and just
at the
think
same
about
time.
the children that are growing up, especially young children, like between maybe 2 years old and 8 years old, that are now homebound, not going to school as much, and certainly not getting any exercise. I mean, even in school, there's little exercise. You get that 15-minute break. You might have an hour for lunch, but now I don't even know if that's going on.
Yeah, well,
the children.
and the other thing is the rise of video games and computer activities. If the kids are sitting, even going to school via video, via the computer, they're sitting in a chair. They're not moving. They're not getting around. And parents use. How many times have you seen a child sitting with a cell phone from the parent's cell phone playing a little game to keep it? It's the babysitter now. You used to sit the kid down in front of the TV. Now you set him down in front of the computer. And
well, even if the babysitter's there, the babysitter's probably on a device of some kind too. So I mean, it's really kind of a play.
Yeah,
and getting unplugged seems to be harder and harder. We find that ourselves. So I mean, and we're trying our best for sure. So let's.
This is another follow-up to our conversation last week regarding the pollution of.
This comes from The Guardian. It calls chemical pollution has passed the safe limit for humanities, scientists say. The cocktail of chemical pollution that pervades the planet now threatens the stability of global ecosystems upon which humanity depends.
Yeah, plastics. Do you remember when they came out with the PCBs, and that was a few years ago?
Yeah. And replaced it with other plastics.
Well, the PCBs were in your water bottles, all the recycled water bottles, and so on. And then if you left it in your car and the heat, it leached into your water and you were drinking it, and it was even now when I have the smart water for our aminos. I'll refill it from our filtered hydrogenated water, but I only fill it twice. And then I just get rid of the bottle, and it's not hot in the house.
Yeah, the plastics have gotten better as far as leaching, but like Mother Earth Labs, who now we're affiliated with, has got options for buying glass containers. So that's a huge thing, Here
we're using the metal, the Hydro Flask, instead of the plastic bottle.
There's definitely options. However, options cost money too. So if you can afford it, great. But if you can't, then the lower you are in the rung of the ladder of economics, the more susceptible you are to diminishing your immune system because of all these environmental things, not only just the food that you can't afford.
Plastics are a particularly high concern. 350,000 synthetic chemicals, including pesticides, industrial compounds, and antibiotics, are added to that list. And plastic pollution is now found from the summit of Mount Everest to the deepest oceans. And PCBs are long-lasting and widespread.
Yeah.
Now, this is important right here.
Okay, go ahead.
The study concludes chemical pollution has crossed a planetary boundary, at which point, the point at which human-made changes to the Earth put it outside the stable environment of the last 10,000 years.
Since the last catastrophe.
Right.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Right.
Remember, we're coming up with new ways of getting these plastics out of the ocean. There's quite a few environmental companies that have really figured out how to, net this stuff and get it out, and they're bringing it ashore and finding different ways of using it as far as making furniture out of it, making clothing out of it, things like that. So there are solutions taking place, but this is a
well, here's a quote right here. You know, despite the fact that there are people inventing new ways of getting plastics out of the ocean and so on, there was a professor at University of Gothenburg who was doing was part of the team doing all this investigation. She said the total mass of plastic now exceeds the total mass of all living mammals.
wow.
Now that is, I mean, no matter how much time you spend getting plastic out of the ocean, there are still miles and miles of floating mats of accumulated plastics out there.
We use plastics for everything. So there has been also a 50-fold increase in the production of chemicals since 1950, and this is projected to triple by 2050. And this is what we talked about last week: the glyphosate and the other types of chemicals that are using for not only fertilizer but just broad spraying on all our plants. And I've read articles where they're saying even the organic plants have this on them.
Well, because it's in the air.
Because it's in the air, it's also in the water.
In the soil.
And how do we get it out of the water? It really creates a real problem because now we have to spend the money to get this stuff out.
Well, and it's also at a micro level that it's very difficult to get out.
Yeah. And remember what we mentioned last week too, folks, is that we mentioned that it's the same companies that are supplying us with the drugs and the vaccines are making these chemical fertilizers. And
we talked about that last week. And the other problem is that once determining whether chemical pollution has crossed a planetary boundary is complex, because there is no pre-human baseline.
Yeah.
And unlike other things that we can look at the pre-industrial level of CO2 in the atmosphere, for example, or something of that nature, but there are so many chemical compounds registered for use, and only a tiny fraction of them have been assessed for safety.
Yeah.
The problem is that in very, very small amounts, it's not dangerous, but it's not very small amounts. And people did fail to take into consideration the fact that you pollute the earth, you pollute the soil, you pollute the water, you pollute the air, and it's global. It's not just over the one field.
Yes.
No.
It says here there's about 350,000 registered chemical compounds being used. 350,000.
And that's just the ones that we know about.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. So there was a professor, Sir Ian Boyd, at the University of St. Andrews in the UK, and he said, the rise of the chemical burden in the environment is diffuse and insidious. Even if the toxic effects of individual chemicals can be hard to detect, this doesn't mean the aggregate effect will be insignificant.
Yeah, he says also regulation is not designed to detect or understand these effects. We are relatively blind to what is going on as a result.
Yeah, in this situation where we have a low level of scientific certainty about effects, there's a need for a much more precautionary approach to new chemicals and to the amount being emitted to the environment.
Yeah, he's a former UK government chief scientific advisor, warned in 2017 that the consumption by regulators around the world that it was safe to use pesticides at industrial scales across the landscape was false. The chemical pollution planetary boundary, is the fifth of 9.
Yeah, this is very interesting because apparently, planetary boundaries, again, as we described, was from 10,000 years ago, the first time we've exceeded it. And there are apparently 9 boundaries that have been crossed. And that includes global heating, the destruction of wild habitats, loss of biodiversity, excessive nitrogen and phosphorus pollution. And then we have the chemical pollution on top of that.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
And the last article we have here is the ingredients in common weed killer impairs insect immune systems, study suggests. And of course...
Yeah, this is a follow-up to our discussion last week about glyphosate and the human toll, but this is even more...
Well, of course, and I've told the story before, maybe about 5 or 6 years ago, when my dad and I first went to Florida.
5 or 6 years ago?
I told the story.
Oh, tell the story.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I went to Florida in the real late 50s, early 60s, and we went down towards the Everglades. And the amount of birds in the air was just unbelievable. I mean, they were everywhere, on every tree, on every branch, picking
On the
at
fences,
on the
everywhere.
fences. There were no fences, actually.
Oh, okay.
But it was just astounding. And then when I finally moved to Florida in 1975, I went back to the Everglades.
Yeah, when we were, remember we took a trip where we drove over to the East Coast,
Yeah, and we went down the
down Alligator Alley or the
actually
Tamiami
south
Trail.
of it. Yeah, Tamiami Trail, and we went to Key West.
0 birds.
We could hardly see any birds.
There
One
was-
or two on a tree here and there.
And the whole entire
But even
trip.
in 75, it was a dramatic change. Now, I went diving with my buddy Ron in Jupiter, Juneau, Florida, many times, and this was around 1978 when we first started to do that, and fish were everywhere. And then it was about, the last time I went with him was around, I think around the mid 80s, maybe just 83, 84, something like that. And then we had to search for the fish. And I can only imagine the difference now. Yeah, you'll see schools of fish, but I mean, you could drop in maybe a couple of 100 yards from the beach back in the 70s and just drop down
And look at all the fish.
and look at all the fish everywhere. And then
And we're
it just
on the
changed.
tropics, and
Yep.
it was warm water, and there were
So,
lots of fish.
and the reason I bring this up is the insects are the food for the birds.
Oh yeah, big time.
So you know, if
So
if
what
there's-
happens when glyphosate
Well, it's killing everything naturally.
affects all the insects?
Yeah.
It's interfering with their melanin production. Suggests the adverse effect on insects by interfering with their melanin production suggests the potential for a large-scale ecological impact, including impacts on human health.
Of course, it impacts our food directly because we eat birds and we eat fish. And we eat the animals that roam.
Yeah, I mean,
And
frogs eat insects. There's so many animals
and
that
we've all heard the stories about the bee populations. And of course, bees are big management now. So in the wild, I can only imagine it's diminished quite a bit, but even the beekeepers are claiming that.
Well, there was an article also that talked about
Yeah.
the fact that it was killing the bees, and it says, and plus, don't forget, there's so many insects that help, like butterflies and whatever, and bees that help
Well, these
pollinate.
pollinate everything.
Yeah.
Yes, so the insects are an integral part of our whole ecosystems. It says here our results show unexpected effects. I don't know why they're unexpected.
Right.
From a widely used herbicide, and alert us to the fact that spreading these chemicals in the environment may have unintended consequences. Well,
You know, here's the problem: is that if you have the hubris to think that you can control any of this, that by spraying a field you have no impact on the neighboring fields or on the ground or on the air. I mean, that's just ignorance on a colossal scale.
Yeah.
And it's a tunnel vision, and you take a sledgehammer to the nail, you're going to have repercussions.
Yeah, and it's showing up everywhere, and our immune systems being compromised as directly impacts this article from the insects. So if it's infecting the insects, it's probably infecting us.
It's working its way through the
And
entire
there's no doubt about it,
hierarchy.
because you look at the population of the richest country in the world, where people should be the healthiest, we're not the healthiest. In
Have
fact,
the
now
most
they're
access
really
to
finding.
medical care.
Yeah, exactly. So we have access to everything, including bad food and all these pesticides. But now it's also impacting these third world countries where the healthy people used to be. If they were unhealthy, they were only unhealthy because they maybe were living in a desert and didn't have the resources. But a lot of these indigenous people who are still around today are some of the healthiest people there are.
All right. Well, it's, just looking a little bit more about this article, it says researchers found that in certain types of mosquitoes, glyphosate inhibits melanin production and melanization, which makes them more susceptible to infection by malaria.
Wow.
So that this could lead to an incredible increase in malaria.
Yeah. Well, not only malaria, of course.
Well, right, and
malaria is really
West
not a problem.
Nile disease.
Yeah, and you know, when we go to these countries that have malaria, we have to get our shot to even go there. But the people who actually live there don't seem to have as much of a problem.
Well, it says here that there are some concerns now about the increasing use of glyphosate in regions of the world where malaria is endemic. So it could be that this leads to some kind of a mutation that even where it's not a problem because people are used to it and they take precautions, that it could be something that is a rising concern.
I think so. I think definitely it's a rising concern.
Yeah.
So we have this new established affiliation with the lab, Mother Earth Labs, who made the Primal Edge for us. I know a lot of people who may be listening to this have never taken that.
Well, let's talk about it for a minute.
Yeah.
You know, Primal Edge was a one-shot.
Well, it was 10
liquid.
years ago that we approached this lab. In fact, Paige Clark, who was my co-host for many years, is actually the one who had a relationship with the lab. And she helped develop the formula for the Primal Edge. And we took a couple of different products and kind of put them together into this one-shot wonder type of thing.
Right.
And it really worked well.
It's a liquid multivitamin, mineral, trace elements, and it included humic and fulvic acid.
And this is when we were on TFNN, Tiger Financial News Network, who was owned by Tom and Tommy O'Brien. And we had a really good relationship while we were in Clearwater and St. Pete area. And I've been working with them since 2008, when I started jiu-jitsu pretty much. And I started this show because Tom wanted to talk about health. And
because it's part of your wealth.
That's right. And that's what he said. So after a couple of years, Paige Clark came on the scene, and we established a real nice rapport together and decided to co-host the show together. It went video, and we had really thousands of episodes. When Paige Clark got a little too busy a few years ago, you decided to come on, and that was a blessing for me because I really didn't want to do the show alone. But all through those years, we were using... It's been 2 years already. Yeah. We were using the Primal Edge, and it was something that TFNN sold through the affiliation with the Mother Earth.
You could order through TFNN, through the website and so on.
So... Tommy called me the other day and said we're just sold the last bottle and we're not going to renew it. You're not here anymore, and I understand. You know, they have.
Well, we had talked for a long time about making a different arrangement. Ever since we moved, we've been talking about making an arrangement.
My concern was really the cost. Because Mother Earth Labs has they had their own products. So I called Stuart, one of the doctors there, and he says, why don't you just get on the affiliation program? It's a lot easier. Then I don't have to ship it to you, and then you don't have to ship it out. And he says, we have a lot of great products. And, you know, we had a little discussion there. And, of course, the product Fulvic and Humic was the basis for the Primal Edge. It's the kind of the signaling program. And if you don't have the signaling, you're not going to, you know, most of this stuff is wasted and it goes out through your body through our waste system. Excreted out. So the combination of using the Fulvic and Humic, which has a lot of good vitamins, mostly the essential vitamins and minerals in it already, and if you use the called essential multivitamins with it, which is
also a liquid.
Yeah, it's also a liquid, and it also has the 9 amino acids in it, which is really important.
Is good.
Has all the omega-3s that you need in it, and then adds some of the nutrients that we had in the Primal Edge in it. So the combination between those two, for me, is the gold standard of if you want to really remain healthy and you're eating a good diet and you add this to your diet, you're probably not going to have any of the problems that most of the people have.
It will support and boost your immune system. It will help your body repair itself. And it will strengthen your cell walls and enable the body to do its job of removing toxins and letting the good nutrients in.
And it takes the bad stuff out.
Yeah.
So in the show notes here in the description, you'll find there's a little sentence here for those of you who have purchased Primal Edge on TFNN. But anybody who is interested in this, you can go to the thing, click on the humic fulvic acid.
What thing?
There's a little tab there. It says hit the link.
Okay.
Okay, and it's highlighted, and you can. There's some links below too, and there's a whole link to the Mother Earth Labs and all the products they carry. It's one of the best labs in the United States. They don't use any of the GMOs, or they take all this stuff out. They take real good care of their products.
And by the way, we are not sponsored by them at all.
No, we're just affiliated.
Yeah,
we do.
Well, no, but we didn't. We want you to try it.
Yeah.
We want you to explore. We want you to decide for yourself if you feel better. Because I remember talking to people.
30 days you use these products, you're going to feel the difference.
Yeah, well, I remember when we were first talking with folks about Primal Edge, and one fellow said, "Boy, I feel like a different person. I would never be without it now, you know." And so we feel good, and we want to share that with you, and also just basically because of the new arrangement, it can be just a little cheaper than it was.
It is cheaper. It's a little bit less, and if you just use the Fulvic and Humic, you're going to see a huge difference. If you now you have the choice of using the multivitamin. It's called Essential Multivitamin. There's links in the show notes. There's a link to Mother Earth Labs. It's also a link to our website, which explains Fulvic and Humic acid. It's also on their website. They have a lot of good information. You can call them and ask them about things. They're very receptive to giving information out, and I think you'll find this is a really good source of vitamins. Yeah, it's the only lab I would go to for that, except maybe Body Health, where we get some aminos.
Where we get our complete aminos. Yeah.
So that's the show today, folks, and thanks a lot for sticking around. We really appreciate it, and be healthy, be safe, and be well.
And we'll see you next week.
Bye bye.